Secret life with a married man erupted when his wife discovered me pregnant, leading to custody battles and relentless harassment. I'm 28 and new to all of this, and suddenly I found myself in the strangest situation with a married man, and ma'am who's 32. He told me he's going away with his wife for an overnight stay at a spa and leisure hotel, but secretly, I'd be staying too, just in another room. The only ones who knew were ma'am and me. His wife was completely in the dark. The reality of it set my nerves on fire. The plan was for him to sneak over to my room whenever he could, and we'd see each other around the hotel's facilities. She hates swimming and had booked a massage for herself, which meant I'd have him for an hour, just the two of us, sneaking glances and touches in the pool and hot tub, blending our excitement with the ever-present anxiety of being discovered. The idea thrilled me. He was paying for the whole stay, which made it all feel secretly romantic, like we were living out something dangerous and cinematic. But the nerves kept bubbling up. Would I give anything away in my facial expressions if I saw them together? Would the tension show if we crossed paths in the foyer or by the elevators? The anticipation of our getaway was intoxicating and nerve-wracking all at once. When the weekend finally came and I got home, I felt this bittersweet ache inside me. He'd snuck into my room 4 times that night. He just told her he was going out for a smoke. Those stolen moments, the kisses and laughter, were beyond amazing. But being there and seeing them together around the hotel, it hit me harder than I expected. His wife wasn't at all what I'd imagined. In fact, she was everything I'm not: tall, skinny, long blonde hair. It made me wonder what he saw in me. He always told me I was gorgeous, funny, just what he needed. And when we got our time alone while she was off getting her massage, swimming and sitting together in a hot tub, and again in my room, I really felt the connection. Still, there was this heaviness I couldn't shake. Watching him act like the doting husband in front of her put a dark twist on what should have been a fairytale weekend. Was it silly for me to feel upset? Despite everything, I did have a great time with him, but part of me just couldn't let go of her presence, or what it meant. The weeks that followed only made things more complicated. After that strange, exhilarating weekend with and his wife, I realized something important. It wasn't fair for him to pull me into a situation like that. I put so much thought into our time together, getting ready, waiting for that excitement, and then suddenly, there she was, part of the trip like an uninvited ghost. I told him that seeing them together hurt me, that I felt disrespected, even though our private moments stayed magical. He apologized and said it wouldn't happen again, that we'd go out to talk, just the two of us. But after that, things changed. The tone, the rhythm of his messages, the absence of good morning texts. He started replying less, sometimes making me wait hours. I felt lost and adrift, constantly checking my phone, replaying the last time we saw each other in my head. My anxiety flared. I started questioning everything. Was it me? Had I said something wrong? I wanted so badly to send him a message explaining how all of this was making me feel, but I worried about driving him further away. Everything between us had been so good, all that laughter and love and secrets, and now it was like a shadow had fallen. He wasn't asking to see me, and I just wanted to crawl back into his arms, to forget about all the chaos and uncertainty. More time passed, and eventually we talked a little, but he kept his walls up. It was days of me asking and prodding until he finally admitted why. His wife was pregnant. He told me he needed to keep his distance because she'd been having suspicions accusing him of seeing someone else, though he blamed it all on hormones. Things had quieted a little by then, and he invited me to his house for a romantic weekend while his wife was supposed to be away seeing her parents. I threw myself into planning, new clothes, buying his favorite foods, imagining the perfect weekend for just us. But then, with no warning, his wife showed up early. I saw the headlights out front and had to bolt out the back door, heart hammering, barely able to grab my things. The adrenaline, the fear of being caught, was unreal. Now I was left just waiting, wondering, did he hide my things? Did she find something? Why hasn't he called? It's like I can't breathe, and I can't talk to anyone about it. I keep replaying everything: the secret getaways, the sneaking around, the plans to maybe go legit one day, even though deep down, I could tell he wasn't ready, especially now with a baby. He didn't want the child, but she didn't seem to care. That sadness is sharp and deep. I love him, and I wish we could just have a life without all the hiding and fear and chaos. Sometimes I even catch myself hoping she found out, that the truth is out, and maybe, just maybe, we could be together for real. I know it's wishful and foolish, but everything is tangled and raw right now. So much has happened in a few short months, and I'm standing at the edge of my nerves. The last few months have left me deflated and at my wit's end, with nowhere to turn. After that near miss at his house, I thought I was in the clear until I found out otherwise. His wife had come home that night because she suspected something and installed some type of recording device. She caught my voice on the audio, and everything exploded. Their marriage descended into constant arguments, and the stress landed her in the hospital. For a while, he disappeared on me, hardly giving any updates, leaving me in the dark about a situation I was deeply entwined in. It forced me to really reflect on everything I'd been a part of. The thrill, the secrecy, all of it felt intoxicating, childishly exciting, but I started seeing it for what it was: selfish, destructive, and shameful. I hated what we'd done to her, hated the person I'd allowed myself to become, and yet, heartbreakingly, that longing for him just wouldn't go away. Even with all that clarity, even after all the chaos, I still find myself wishing things were different, yearning for him, wishing for a world where we could just be together, free of all the pain we'd caused. About 2-3 years ago, as a 29-year-old woman, I found myself entangled in a relationship with a married man, who was 33 at the time. I know I shouldn't have gone down that path, and I wish I could say I had more control over who I fell in love with. Eventually, his wife discovered our affair, and everything exploded. She attacked me, and after the chaos settled, she ended up asking him for a divorce. After that storm, he and I reconciled, and we decided to try to make a relationship work between us. I admit that I was selfish, and I truly didn't consider how devastating this would be for his wife. Trust me, I have torn myself apart over it more than anyone else ever could. I'm not looking for judgment, I just need some advice, as I've already told myself every harsh word imaginable a million times over. Unfortunately, his ex-wife seemed determined to ruin my life in every way she could. Because of her actions, deeply private details about my life leaked out to my close family and friends, information I would have preferred to keep secret. The fallout was enormous. I lost people I loved and depended on, all at a time when I needed support the most. To complicate this impossible mess, I am now pregnant. Personally, I am against having an abortion, so I've decided to keep my baby, but this decision has left me painfully isolated. I have no family or friend support, and my partner is fully absorbed in a divorce. I'm desperately trying to keep my new home location hidden for obvious reasons, and that paranoia presses down on me at a time when I can't bear any extra stress. My partner has also moved out of his former home and might be losing it altogether, which devastates me. He promised this wouldn't happen, and now the future I once envisioned for us in that house is slipping away before my eyes. Trying to gather myself amidst this chaos, I realize that, while the situation is utterly messy, I must believe it won't be like this forever. Right now, I'm desperate for advice from anyone who has faced pregnancy without the comfort and support of family or friends. Honestly, I'm not certain how supportive my partner will be. He doesn't seem very excited about the pregnancy. But with everything he's dealing with, I suppose I can't blame him. Despite knowing what he had done to me in the past, when he started texting me again, telling me he loved and missed me and that he wasn't having a baby with his wife, I fell for it. The old feelings came rushing back, the butterflies, the constant thoughts of him. When he invited me over, I stupidly agreed, letting my heart overrule my head yet again. But as soon as I knocked on his door, it flew open, and his wife, utterly unhinged, launched herself at me, screaming and blaming me for all her misery. I was so stunned, I just ran like a scared child back to my car, my clothes torn as she threw anything she could get her hands on at me. I filed a police report and will be pressing charges for my torn clothes and the dents in my car. He was nowhere to be found while this was happening, probably hiding away like a coward. Now, the devastation is overwhelming. I've been in tears constantly. The harassment from this woman is non-stop. She claims to have photos and videos of me and threatens to share them, although I have yet to see any proof. She's contacted my friends, even discovered things about my life I never thought she'd find out, and now my friends believe I'm some sort of monster. I had to delete all my social media, and she's telling the entire world about me through her own platforms, contacting my workplace until they blocked her. She is making my life miserable in every way she can. I admit my actions were wrong, and I am deeply ashamed, but the extent of her destruction is so exhausting. Good friends are gone, and I feel impossibly deflated. I'd tried reaching out to my ex, pleading with him to put an end to this torture, but I've been met only with silence. He has blocked me or is just ignoring me. Right now, I am scared. I'm staying with my mother because I'm terrified my ex will give her my address, given her willingness to get physical with me. I might have to get a new apartment, change my phone number, my entire life uprooted. And the worst part, he gets to waltz away unscathed, as if nothing happened. It's so unfair, and I can't believe I let this happen to me. The only small comfort is that I'm keeping the police updated on every incident, but everything else is just so messed up. I'm really depressed and feel so pathetic. Still, I have a sliver of hope that I can move on from this, and I desperately wish for some words of comfort. Maybe I don't deserve them, but I'm only human, and right now, I just need a compassionate ear to get me through tonight. Has anyone been in a situation like this and found a way through? Any advice would mean the world right now. I thought everything had finally gone as quiet as it could get when I changed my number and moved into a little place with heavy curtains and a front door that sticks. I'd started counting my days in cups of peppermint tea, and who knew you could cry that much naps. Then the thick brown envelope landed on my doormat with a heavy thud like a dare. Family court papers. She was trying to flip the story, accusing me of harassing her, petitioning for a non-molestation order against me. Reading my name on those pages made me shake so hard I had to sit on the floor. My mom kept smoothing my hair like I was 5 again, but I could feel how frightened she was too. We showed up at the hearing with my stack of screenshots and police incident numbers, and as she was in a cream coat with bitter eyes, and him on a separate bench, hollowed out and neatly dressed, staring at the scuffed toes of his shoes. It was all fluorescent lights and the scratch of biro against paper. She launched into it, voice wobbling but loud, painting me as the shadow in the hedges who wouldn't let their marriage breathe. And then my barrister slid the printouts forward, her messages to my friends, the photos of my car, the voicemail of her screaming outside my old flat. There was a moment, just a breath, where the air changed. The judge looked at her like you look at someone who's tripped over their own cruelty. His voice was very calm when he said her application was dismissed. Then he granted me the order, the words rattling out in this flat tone that made my pulse go quiet for the first time in months. She stood up, chair scraping, and for a second I thought she'd storm across the room. But security moved, and instead she made this awful little laugh and said, "You have no idea," to no one in particular. He didn't look at me. Not once. I had my 12-week scan that afternoon because of course the universe loves double booking disasters. I lay there on the bed with my jumper bunched under my chin, and the room turned dark as the sonographer tilted the screen toward me. It was a grainy universe at first, just snow and shadows, and then she stilled her hand and pressed a little harder. "Okay," she said softly, like she was smoothing down a duvet, "so. 2. The word didn't fit in my head. She pointed, gently tracing each flicker. 2 heartbeats. The sound of it filled the room like the warm rush you get standing too fast. I covered my mouth and cried in that ugly, amyl way that feels like it comes from your ribs. She passed me tissues and printed extra pictures without saying anything sentimental at all, which somehow made it more tender. I tucked the black and white moons into my bag and walked out into the brightness with my eyes stinging in the strange, fierce clarity in my bones. I bought 2 impossibly small white vests from the supermarket on my way home and put them on the kitchen table like proof that I hadn't dreamed it. He called me from a number I didn't recognize just after 6, like the day hadn't already been torn down and rebuilt twice. He said he was nearby, that he just wanted to talk. I told him if he wanted words, it had to be in public, daylight, plenty of witnesses. We met at a tiny cafe that smells faintly of bleach and cinnamon. He looked bleached out too, like someone had run him out and pegged him on a line. His first words were, "You look tired," which made me laugh in spite of everything. He tried a whole little speech about being sorry, and missing me, and not sleeping. Then he pivoted so fast I nearly missed it, said the order was a bit much, that it would inflame things, that his solicitor said my statement could complicate custody down the line. Custody. Like he was thinking seasons ahead when I was still trying to survive daylight. I told him about the scan. I watched his eyes do the math and then go flat. He reached for my hand across the table and I pulled back so quickly my cup rattled. He said he loved me. It sounded like he was reciting something he'd learned phonetically. When I said I wouldn't soften anything with the police, that I was done being the soft thing in the story, his mouth thinned into that expression I know too well, the one that says, "How dare you stop making it easy." He left with his jaw tight and his coat collar high. The doorbell chimed after him like a bad punchline. That night, a message landed in my DMS from a woman I didn't know. Her photo was the kind of normal smile that makes you let your guard down. "I think we need to talk about Jay," she wrote, using his full name like a lit fuse. I ignored it for a full hour, then met her the next afternoon on a bench near the duck pond, because it felt ridiculous to sit in a cafe again so soon. She was younger than me and braver than I'd been, and she showed me months of messages that overlapped with mine so exactly I felt nauseous, down to the way he'd sent her a photo of his boring pasta dinner on a night he'd supposedly been with me. He'd told her I was a crazy ex who wouldn't let go, and he'd used photos of me as cautionary tales, blurry candids where I looked mid-laugh, mid-bite, mid-life, captioned with lies in a tone that sounded like care. She had left him last week when he'd slipped and called her by a name that wasn't hers. Suddenly, the threats about photos and videos made a new kind of sense I didn't want. We sat there on the damp wood and compared dates until we both started laughing, not because anything was funny but because the alternative was screaming. Before we parted, she forwarded everything to the officer on my case with this level-headed efficiency that made me want to hug her. I walked home through the long cold and tried to shake off the sense that my life had been a stage set he'd been repurposing for years. 2 days later, I found a padded envelope on my doormat with no return address. Inside, a cheap USB stick and a yellow post-it that said, "Maybe keep your legs closed X." My hand shook too badly to plug it into anything, but the police did, in a fluorescent room that smelled like disinfectant and tea bags. They cataloged it all instead, kindly, clinically, like they were handling a poisonous plant. I didn't have to see to know what kind of poison it was. The officer looked at me over the stack of forms and said gently that this might take things somewhere more serious, that there were charges for this, that I didn't need to decide anything now. I signed my name, again and again, and walked out with a headache that felt like a hat too tight. I saw his mother for the first time in a supermarket on a Monday morning, the sort of morning where everyone shuffles around cradling milk and bread like talismans. She stood next to the bin bags, small and bird-boned in a navy cardigan. I recognized her straight away even though I'd only seen her in photos. The shape of her mouth, the way she looked like she was about to apologize for the weather. She said my name like it hurt a little to say. I braced, every muscle going tight, but she didn't shout, didn't spit, didn't make a scene. She asked if I had a minute, which was polite to the point of absurdity. We stood between the tinned tomatoes and the pasta like it was neutral ground, and she said, very quietly, that no one deserved what her son did when he thought he could get away with it. I was too stunned to speak. She pressed a paper carrier into my hands and said, "I thought you might need these," and before I could open it or ask or explain or defend, she touched my arm and walked away with her trolley wobbling. I stood there for a long time, holding the bag like a life raft, and when I finally tore the top open back in my car, I found tiny yellow cardigans, soft from years of drawer air, and 2 knitted hats the color of butter. On top, a post-it in tidy blue handwriting, these were his. I kept them. I'm sorry. M. There was one last thing, because apparently this story loves a nighttime finale. Just after midnight that same night, my phone lit up with a new number and a message that made my lungs fold up. I'm outside. I didn't go to the window. I went to the hallway and slid down the wall and called the non-emergency number with the steadiness of someone who's rehearsed. The operator was kind, her voice level. A patrol car rolled up quiet. He was still there when they came, leaning against the low wall, head down, that same ridiculous neat coat. I stayed behind the curtain and listened to voices, to the shuffle of steps on wet pavement. He didn't fight, he never does when there are witnesses. The officers walked him off the property line and had what I imagine was the sort of talk men have with boys who should know better by now. When the blue lights drifted away, I realized my hands had gone pins and easels. I finally looked out. The only thing he had left behind was a plastic bag on the wall with a box of herbal tea in it, the brand I used to drink it is on Sundays, the sort that tastes like hot garden. There was a receipt tucked under the cellophane, paid for in cash, 5 minutes before he messaged me. I don't know if crazy is the right word for any of this, not when everything real is so sharp and heavy. But there are 2 heartbeats now, stubborn and certain as drum taps, and when I lie awake at 3 a.m. listening to the rain tick over the gutters, I picture those tiny hats and remember the sound of the stenographer's voice when she said "too," so soft it almost wasn't a word at all. I've stopped narrating things to him in my head. I hung a scanned printout on the fridge with a cheap magnet shaped like a strawberry and put my phone on airplane mode before bed. For the first time in months, the quiet inside my flat felt like a choice I had made, not something I'd had forced on me. And somewhere between midnight and morning, I slept. The morning after that first decent sleep felt like the house had decided to breathe on my behalf. Then came the knock that sounded like paperwork. 2 officers and a woman with a neat bun and a jacket that made a whisper when she moved. They asked if I was okay to give a longer statement, if I still had the envelope, if they could take my phone for imaging and hand me a curse of a loan the size of a brick. The detective constable checked coral nail varnish, kind. I said very evenly that they'd attended an address first thing and seized multiple devices. Multiple. Such a bland word for a floor going sideways. We sat in a little room that smelled of lemon floor cleaner and photocopier heat while a red dot glowed on the camera and I told the truth in sentences that kept starting again and again. They brought me tea in a polystyrene cup that peeled when my thumb fussed at it. When I was done, she switched the light off and sat back and said, "You are not the first to come in today." I nodded, because what else was there to do but nod and keep breathing. On the way home I bought bread I didn't need just to have something to hold. My phone is phoned for 3 to 5 business days made the sort of buzz that seems to choose a bad moment. A number I didn't know. Her voice felt familiar immediately, even though I'd only ever heard it in my head. We met in the church hall car park because it was as neutral as anywhere. She had a raincoat the color of dishwater and hands that wanted to be busy. They came this morning, she said, as if she were talking about the council collecting the bins. He has things. I didn't know. I suspected. I'm sorry. She passed me a shoebox with a handful of those silver SD cards inside, the ones that look like dull little teeth, and said she'd already given the rest to the police. There's a cot in the loft, she said, very softly, like an apology. If you want it. If you don't, I understand. We drove to her terrace with the peeling paint, then the jangling loose letterbox and wrestled it down together from a hatch that breathed dust and spider silk. It was white once. There was a little pencil line on the inside rail where someone had measured a baby and written a date in tiny, secret numerals. He was a good baby, she said, and then she pressed her lips together like she'd said too much. We slid the cot into my hatchback with the back seats down and our sleeves gray with loft. I had an extra scan the next day, one of those consultant ones where the room feels like a spaceship and the screen makes everything look like bad weather. Twina flipped and refused to be serious about any of it. Twin B did a full body stretch that made the stenographer laugh without looking at me. Everything measured like it should. The labels on the printout looked like the sort of names you use to keep expensive glassware apart. When the stenographer asked if the father would be attending any in future, I said, no, and she didn't look up, just made another note, as if I'd said, milk, no sugar. There was a letter on the mat when I got back with a sort of envelope that is wait and menace before you even touch it. A solicitor on his behalf, paragraphs like barbed wire and a paragraph in bold about defamation and withdrawal of false allegations and prejudice to future contact. The word landed in it like a coin down a well. I took the letter to the station with my groceries still sweating in the bag and the DC skimmed it once and put it in a clear folder with a little shake of her head that was all the commentary it needed. Bail conditions will make this interesting, she said, and then, as if remembering, we'll be in touch about a court date. The other woman from the pond made a group chat that afternoon with a name that made my throat close. There were 4 of us by tea time. Screenshots slotted together like bad wallpaper. Alibis that overlapped like hands in the dark. Someone sent a photo of a spreadsheet he'd made gym/smoke/work drinks with little ticks on nights that were none of those things. My screen lit up with the shared knowledge of strangers and I felt both less singular and more exhausted than I thought possible. One of them had kept a Christmas card where he'd written her name wrong and drawn a little tree wearing baubles that looked like tears. He didn't appear in the ways he used to. No more messages written like emergencies at midnight, no more calls from numbers that didn't belong to anyone. Instead there was a call from the officer on my case saying, very practically, that he'd been charged and granted bail with conditions, no contact, no approaches, no street court in 10 days. Her voice had the tone of someone reading out a bus timetable while we both stood at the stop in the rain. I wrote the case number on a post-it shaped like a lemon and stuck it to the inside of my kitchen cupboard like a charm. It wasn't all headlines and handcuffs. I went to my first antenatal class in a church hall that had been rearranged so many times the floor had grooves you could follow like ley lines. 5 of us sat in a semicircle pretending not to watch one another's bellies and a woman with plaited hair demonstrated how to lace a nappy around a doll with eyes so blue they felt like a joke. We practiced breathing like sensible wolves. On the break I stood in front of the snack table with a paper cup of weak squash and found myself smiling at the plate of crumbly biscuits like they'd done something brave. On the way out, my hand on the push bar of the door, I saw her leaning against a low wall across the car park. All cream coat and brittle. She straightened when she clocked me. I didn't feel scared at first, just aware, like you get when you think about your own blinking. She clocked the bump, her mouth opened and closed once, twice, like a fish in an aquarium that suddenly remembered glass. Twins? She said, not a question and not quite anything else. I lifted my phone enough for her to see the screen and the way my thumb hovered. She made a low noise that could have been a laugh or a sob and turned away with her hand covering most of her face. I sat in my car and called it in and listened to the operator type a record into a system somewhere and said thank you too many times. That night, because the universe adores contrast, I assembled the cot on my living room rug with the instructions the wrong way up and an Allen key that kept slipping through my fingers. It ended up mostly square, which felt like a victory. I propped the tiny butter yellow hats on one rail like a promise to someone I was finally starting to meet. I made a lasagna out of a recipe my mom cut out of a magazine in 2003, and it actually held its shape, steam rising like applause in my dumb little kitchen. The doorbell went once in that way that announces parcels, not people. A girl with a messenger bag handed over a zipped pouch from the station, my phone back, the sticker with my case number curling up at one corner. She smiled the professional smile of someone who has delivered worse, on worse days. I dreamed in rectangles for a week: court benches, scan screens, envelopes, windows. The day before court, his mother texted a sentence that didn't know what to do with itself. He is asked if he can be a father. I stared at it so long the words gave up their shapes. I put the kettle on and stood there listening to its little moan. I didn't reply. I put another post-it inside the cupboard, right next to the lemon, with the names I've been using in my head lately instead of letters. They looked like secrets even to me. When I went to bed I read the back of the herbal tea box like a bedtime story: hibiscus, apple, rosehip, and laughed at my own ridiculousness until I had to press my face into the pillow because the neighbors don't deserve to hear me come apart over ingredients. Court day was all glass and echoes. He looked like last time Tidy Ruin. When the clerk called his name, it landed between us like something heavy. He didn't look up. The charges were read out in that quick monotone they use when the words have been said too many times. The bail conditions grew a spine. The list of people in the gallery was longer than I wanted: her, his mother, and two women from the chat sitting shoulder to shoulder, their hands folded like small flags. When it was over, we all spilled into the same gray stairwell because of course we did. His mother touched the banister like it belonged to her and met my eyes without flinching. I told them everything, she said in the voice you used to admit to burning toast. He won't come near you. She looked tired in a way that lives in the bones, not the face. I nodded. There didn't seem to be a better language. The USB turned into charges of its own mid-week. The DC called me at 7:30, brisk on the surface and warm underneath, to say the CPS were taking it forward, that there would be words like without consent and distress printed on paper that would smell like toner and importance. She warned me about delays, about waiting rooms, about the way the corridors get too bright. I thanked her like a child at Christmas because the alternative was crying into a tea towel over an empty sink. There was one more envelope because apparently that's my genre now. A padded one with no return address, throat gone tight before it was even open. Inside was nothing poisonous this time: no stick of anything ugly, no spite pretending to be a gift. Just a single photograph printed badly on home paper. Two tiny socks I'd bought weeks ago on a whim, the ones with the cross little bears laid out on a table I recognized that wasn't mine. Someone had scrawled across the top in block capitals, "This is what you wanted." I looked at the photo like you look at a snake in a glass box and then slid it straight into a folder and emailed the DC with a subject line that could have been a sigh. I boiled the kettle and held my breath while it built its case. I made the tea and drank it standing up. I don't know if there's a tidy way to end a week where real life keeps lighting matches and holding them under your nerves. But the cot is up, a little wonky, exactly like me. The hats rest on the rail like two patient moons. I pinned the latest scan up with a strawberry magnet next to the list of ingredients I can't pronounce. I put the letters in a drawer and the police incident numbers back behind the cupboard door where the lemons live. When the rain started after midnight, soft against the windows, I lay on my side and watched the flash of blue from a passing car paint the ceiling for a second. I said their secret names into the dark to see how they sounded without another person's story threaded through them. Somewhere under my hand a heel or an L button nudged like a punctuation mark. And when sleep finally came, it was the kind you fall into on purpose. The midwife put a purple sticker on the front of my notes like a quiet flag. She did it without commentary, just a hand that didn't shake and a biro that found the right box first time. "We use a password system on the phones," she said, soft like tissue paper, not looking up. "Anything to do with your care. You pick it." I thought of all the words that had been used against me and then of the one good, sweet thing on my fridge holding up the scan. "Strawberry," I said, and she smiled because people always pick something ordinary. She talked me through a plan as if we were drawing the route out on a napkin. No details on the ward board. No visitors not on list. A note on the computer that might as well be carved into stone: "Do not disclose." She showed me where the purple sticker meant things would stop before they got near me, and it felt like walking through a building and finding hidden doors I hadn't known I could shut. The anomaly scan was the sort of appointment that makes time go thin around the edges. The room was cold and the gel was colder, and the sonographer wore tiny hoop earrings that caught the light when she left under her breath at 20, doing what looked like a three-point turn. Twing B did that long, theatrical stretch again, a slow rolling sigh of limbs that made me think of old black and white films where people smoke in doorways and say clever things. "Everything looks good," she said, briskly tender, tapping measurements into boxes. I told her I didn't want to know any pinks or blues, not yet, not like this. She nodded without surprise and printed me pictures that made it look like I was carrying weather systems in my belly. Back home I stuck the new moons up next to the strawberry and stood back to see ahead if the fridge could hold this much gravity. He found a way around a wall by sending words through someone else's letterbox. My mom's. A hand-addressed envelope that made her mouth go thin before she passed it to me with 2 fingers like it might burn. It was his handwriting, the careful neat he'd always used when he was trying to look like a person he could respect. "I need to see you," the first line said, and then a paragraph full of nostalgia that had the same effect on my pulse as being turned under a cold tap. It wasn't even clever. There was a little postscript like an afterthought: "Tell your mom I'll do this right." I didn't ring him. I rang the station. The DC made the gentle humming noise she makes when she's already standing up from her chair. By lunchtime there was a car outside my mom's bungalow, discreet in a way that made it more conspicuous, and by tea time there was a voicemail on the brick phone saying breach and arrested and back in court tomorrow. I ate toast in the quiet like I was at a wake. He turned up with an ankle that blinked red when he moved. You'd think a tag would look like a cartoon, a ball and chain in modern plastic, but it was small and tidy, like everything about him when he's trying to look like less of a mess. The magistrate didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The new condition sounded like the old ones had grown teeth. Curfew. Address fixed at his mother's. The kind of line on a map you don't step over. He stared at the table like it might give him a better life if he looked hard enough. Outside, his mother stood with her bag clutched like a bird she was trying not to frighten. She didn't come over. She didn't need to. She looked at me in a way that said, "I am holding something heavy and I will not drop it." There was a woman from Children's Services at my kitchen table 2 days later, holding a mug I'd made too strong and a notepad with a logo so cheerful it felt like a joke. She had a voice that lived in the middle register, where reassurance and asking nicely meet. "Pre-birth conference," she said, and I nodded as if that was a phrase I'd grown up with. She went through the form the way you take stitches out slow, competent, checking as she went. "Who's in the household? Who's out? What's on paper? What's on phones? Do you intend to name the father on the birth certificate?" she asked, and my mouth said, "No," before my brain had climbed into the sentence properly. She wrote it down like a fact about the weather. She looked around my little flat with its 2 heavy curtains and its sticking door and the cot that sat slightly crooked, like a smile. I watched her clock the hats, the way the scanned photos had been given the best position in the house. "You have support?" she said. I shrugged and said, "Sort of," and then told her about my mom, and the strange small army of women who knew what it was to find their own face mislabeled in somebody else's story. She nodded, wrote their names down like Lucky Charms, and left me with a list of dates that made my head feel like a filing cabinet. The paper got there before I did. A link flickered into the group chat with my name nowhere and is very much somewhere. It wasn't a big paper, not one you buy when you want to seem serious about current affairs, but there he was in grayscale, a man, 35 with charges that read like someone had taken a highlighter to the worst bits. They didn't say my name and they didn't need to. His was enough. The line about further offenses under consideration made my hands go cold even though there was nothing in it I hadn't already breathed. I closed the tab and watched my ceiling for a bit, the grubby patch by the light fixture that looks like a map of an invented island. Mom called 5 minutes later without saying hello first and we did that thing where you both agree not to say aloud the most poisonous possibilities. After that, kindness turned up wearing charity shop clothes. The girl from the pond arrived with a pram that had had 3 lives already and would do another cheerfully. It smelled faintly of talc and the particular dust that strollers keep in their joints no matter how much you wipe them. We clicked bits into other bits in my hallway and pretended the instruction sheet wasn't in another language. When it stood there finally, a little chariot with 2 seats like open mouths, we both laughed the kind of laugh that takes a teaspoon of something bitter on the way down. She put a small muslin square in the basket with a flourish and said, "Consider it christened." When she left, I wheeled it to the window and stood looking at its reflection in the dark glass like it was a stranger waving back. There were hiccups, literal ones. 20 got them first, tiny regular jolts like a hiccuping robin against the inside of a cup hand. Then B, a more indolent tempo, as if coming to the party a bit late like their mother. I lay on the sofa with both hands on my belly and timed them the way you time bread in the oven. On the telly a quiz show burbled questions about capital cities and British cheeses and nothing felt connected to anything except my 2 insistent metronomes thudding away in the warm dark. He tried once more in a way that would have been funny if it hadn't been my address on the front. A bouquet, the cheap kind that tries too hard, all lilies and supermarket ribbon, left on my mat at 5 a.m. So the petals had sweated in the plastic by the time I found them. No card. Just a petty, perfumed breach pretending to be grand. The patrol car came with yawning constables who photographed the cellophane and put the stems into an evidence bag that looked like it wanted a better story. By lunchtime I'd had a call I could have recited with them words like breach, again, and arrested, again, uttered with a weary precision of people who have memorized a script they don't like. The DC didn't promise me consequences this time. She didn't need to. The CPS did the promising on paper later, the kind with her signature under a sentence you could build a day around. I saw her, the wife, once more, because of course the world is small when you don't want it to be. Supermarket car park. Ray light. She looked like someone who'd slept in day clothes and then put a coat over the top and hoped no one could see. She stood by the trolley return, hands too still, face doing that stiff thing faces do when they have to carry more than they should. He's tagged, she said by way of hello, like she was updating me on the weather. Then, I've given them everything. Her eyes met mine and didn't flinch. We stood there for a second with the trolley coins glinting like little moons in their chains, and I felt something tug in me, not forgiveness, not even sympathy exactly, but the precise ache of two people holding different ends of the same nettle. She lifted a hand a fraction like she was going to touch me and then didn't. When she turned away, I let out a breath like I'd been keeping it on lay-by. The pre-birth conference wasn't a room with too many chairs and a bowl of biscuits sealed shut in cellophane, the sort of place where people have funerals and Zumba on alternate Tuesdays. There were acronyms like a second language, and each professional announced themselves like they were answering a register. I said my name and then twins, and watched the way pens moved when I said no to contact, no to names on paper, no to hospital visitors who don't know the password that makes the line go quiet. At the end the chair said words like plan and support and the word protection in a tone that made it sound like a glass bell being put down over something precious, not a cage. He pleaded not guilty to all of it because of course he did. The clerk's voice didn't crack when she read it out and my hands didn't shake as much as I thought they might. The trial date was a dot on a calendar so far away it might as well have been years. Delays, the DC had warned me, and there they were, walking into the room like uninvited relatives and sitting down at the back. His solicitor said things about misunderstandings and context, and all I could see was the red blink of his ankle under the desk every time his foot moved. His mother didn't look at him. Not once. She folded and unfolded a tissue into a smaller and smaller square until I wanted to take it gently out of her hands and hand her back something she hadn't already wrecked. On the way home, my mom and I stopped at the Big Asda and bought practical things that made the trolley feel like a plan. She put 2 packs of the cheap baby wipes in as if she were sneaking sweets into a cinema, and I pretended not to see. At the checkout, the woman on the till saw the tiny vests and the hat with the silly ears and did a little awe that I let hit me like a warm wave. We took it all back to my flat and put it away in the drawers that used to hold my old life, and I stood there with a pair of impossible socks in my hands and managed not to cry by reading the washing instructions like they were a spell. I got a letter with my own name spelled right at the top for once, from the hospital, confirming the notes on my file. Password, strawberry. There it was in black and white, a tiny ridiculous fruit turned into a key. I stuck it on the inside of a cupboard door next to the lemons, and the case number enclosed like I was folding up a part of the world that was finally arranged in a way that made sense. When the rain moved in that evening, soft and constant, I lay on the sofa with my hand on the place where hiccup starred and said the secret names to the ceiling again, less like a dare and more like practice. He was somewhere counting the minutes between curfews and court dates. I was here, counting kicks. Between us, a line of rules and paper and people with clipboards. Above us, the same patch of indifferent sky. Inside, 2 heartbeats tapping out their steady, selfish, saving song.